Well, greetings, all you journeyers of the soul. Welcome to Soul Empowerment. My name is David McLeod. I am your lifemasterycoach.com. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation because we are continuing our look at how we respond to what goes on in the world. Uh, we had a conversation a month ago, and I believe it was called Discern, Determine, and Decide. And today we're looking at things a little bit differently, but we're going to have a similar concept, talking about choices we make when things aren't looking so well. And that's why we're calling this one When the Cookie Crumbles. So I would like to begin by having my panelists, my co-panelists, introduce themselves. And this is alphabetical order today, the way I see you on my screen. So Gail, I'm going to ask you to go first.
All righty. Welcome, welcome. My name is Gail Nowak. I am the founder and creator of Sage Sensation Retreats, and I am on a mission to redefine leadership for those who are destined to be leaders in the co-creation of New Earth. And I specialize in guiding New Earth leaders who really want to show up, speak up, and shine confidently. I help them with energy first, healing centered coaching and retreats that transform the way that you communicate so that you can uplift humanity with your unique magic.
Beautiful. And I love that you mentioned the word leadership. And in fact, it resonated so strongly with me today that I thought that's got to be our topic next month, about how we show up as leaders in life. And so I'm putting a thumbnail into that one so we can talk about that when we have our next meeting. I think leadership is really, really important. And one way or another, we all lead somehow in our lives. So that's a really, really important topic. So thanks for sharing that. Sarah, how are you today?
It's all well here in England. Thank you very much indeed. Well, for some people it is, but for me it definitely is. As when people say, "Is everything okay?" It's just, I'm fine. It's all the others.
You know, I've heard people say it'll be okay in the end. So if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Yeah, that came from the film Best Exotic Marigold Gold Hotel, didn't it?
Well, there you go. I'm glad that you remembered that.
It was used in it. I don't know whether it actually came from it. As I said, I'm in the UK. I work with energy in the form of Reiki, but also in the form of sound, the voice, toning. And one of the main things I work with is your name. It's really important. Your name is a really important part of who you are for this physical experience. And for those who've experienced it, and yet there are going to be those people who've changed their name, and I asked to work with the name their mother called them as a child. And it is amazing the effects it has on people. I also work with people with their inner child and with trauma, hurt, and pain. And so whether that it is, I suppose it is leadership in a way, isn't it? But it's helping, it's leading people to themselves.
Right.
And that's what our soul's about, isn't it? Leading people back to themselves.
Exactly.
So yes, that's me.
Well, thank you. And now you've given me another topic title, right? What's in a name? So I know, Gail, you're writing this down, so you keep track of all these title ideas. I think that's going to be a great topic as well. So yeah, let's put that on the back burner and figure out how to bring it forward. And my friend Scott, thank you so much for being here. And it's your turn to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey there, Scott Holmes, up in Boston, Massachusetts. So I'm intuitive quantum healer. What does that mean? It means I show up as people need me to show up within their lives, whether it's grounding, clearing, exorcism of past lives, all of those things that energy healers do, but also in guiding people to find who they are, to find their true selves, to find their true name. Sarah is wonderful with the sound, with the naming, And I've often said, you watch the programs where they have ghosts and demons in a bit, and you cannot exorcise a demon or heal the demon unless you know its name. And within each of us, we have those traumas. When we give it a name, we can then release it. But yes, I'm really looking forward to this topic because I think we all have a story.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for that. And so now you've given me yet another topic title. And the one that came to my mind as you were speaking was taking the quantum leap. And I think that really that's what we're talking about here anyway. That's this whole idea of soul empowerment. Instead of allowing our ego minds to run the show, we allow our souls to have a greater presence in our lives. And for many people, that is a quantum leap. So let's put another thumbnail in that one. Hopefully, we'll have that. And I just want to welcome Sherry here to the show, and anybody else who comes on live. Please feel free to post your questions or comments in the chat, and we will do our best to respond to those. All right, so here we are. We've had a conversation before coming on this show. We had a conversation about this idea of when life maybe doesn't seem like it's working all that well, when things maybe seem to be disintegrating, when, as they say, the cookie crumbles. And so we're going to be talking today about how we respond to life when that sort of thing happens. Now, there are other metaphors that people use, when life throws a curveball, when life gives you lemons, all these kinds of little bumper sticker things that you've heard of. But often it seems a lot more extreme than that. It seems sometimes that everything's just falling apart, that life is crumbling around us. And so what does that feel like? Let's begin by how we notice when things like that are happening. What are you feeling in your body? What kinds of energies are going through your body and your mind and your soul when that sort of thing happens? And I'm just going to open the floor, so whoever wishes to speak, please speak up.
So I was in that point in my life where things were crumbling, where there were no pieces. I had thought I had a very structured life and was very, very content to live that very small box until my daughter got stricken ill, and then my wife was also diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
So all of the parameters that I was living under fell away. Definitely a cookie crumble. You couldn't even tell it was a cookie because there was so much dust.
Right.
And when you're in that point, I think I've talked to many people who are at that point, and you look up and you go, okay, I can't change any of this. I can't move any of this. What do I do? And you look to a higher power, however you view him or her, or that whatever that energy is, to say, I just want to get through the next day. Sometimes I just want to get through the next hour. And that whole loss of, you realize, for me anyway, the lessons were enormous in about what was important, what truly mattered. And at 25 years old, I truly lost my forever. When you're 25, and David, you attest to this because you've done so many kind of outrageous stuff in your life, that you are immortal. Nothing you do will ever harm you, and if you get hurt, you come back anyways. I lost my immortality at 25, and it changed my entire perspective all the way across the line. So when the crumbling part actually was a rebirth for me in how to come out of that, how to really, when everything is stripped away and you're just naked there in the field, and it's just you and what you perceive of God. It's it makes you realize how little power you do actually have in your life, and that it's all about how you perceive yourself. So in the stripping away, the crumbling really allows for those kind of transformations to happen.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Yeah, and I know that outrageous is one of the adjectives that people do use when describing me sometimes. So thank you for that. Who would like to go next?
Okay, very different for me. I think my world required to crumble. It really did require to crumble. I'd spent so many years as a people pleaser, and that is a dreadful rut to get stuck into. I was so insecure. And then I ended up with a broken jaw. Dentist broke it, extracting a wisdom tooth. They didn't actually know that it was broken for a week. So that had been a very fun week. And by the time they'd finished with a sort of 2-hour operation to sort of try and put the thing back into place, sort of put wires in and goodness knows what else, it actually resulted in 6 months of pain and sleepless nights. So the broken jaw I now see as an amazing gift, because I was so exhausted that, and I was, gratefully I didn't have children, but I was running the house, studying accountancy, being a people pleaser, and working full time out on the road. It wasn't just a matter of, yeah, it was, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And so everything so-called came crumbling down, but the jaw was the start of that. Me walking out of my marriage was me taking control of my life. And within a couple of weeks of doing that, we all then got told we were getting made redundant. And so the job was going as well, but by a company that was literally just round the corner from my sister in Bournemouth. So I was going to be, but I got the chance to move back nearer to family, because I was definitely up with my ex's family, not my own family. And so I was very lucky. Yes, my life fell to pieces. Everything went. My home went, sort of job went, the lot went. But on the other hand, I started to find me.
Mm.
And so things falling apart, I wasn't even on this path at this stage, but somehow I felt so blessed by it all. But no, it wasn't a fun time. That's 6 months of pain and sleepless night and still being the people pleaser and whatever. It was not a nice place to be. And that's when I suppose the comfort zone became uncomfortable. It became, I couldn't do, and the way I put it was, Kevin was in one rut, I was in another. They were running parallel. His were lined with rose petals, mine were lined with rose thorns, and I couldn't put up with it anymore.
Mm.
And so, yes, but when I took the courage to say, this is now going to be about me and my life, other things did crumble, but actually they helped me, they supported me to move from Northampton to where I was, to Bournemouth. I still took redundancy after 6 months secondment, bought my own little house, walked straight into a brand new job. The universe really gave me gifts for honoring what was really right for me to do. So life can crumble in different ways. And it's really important to be, I think, to be open to what's going on and why is it going on.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Gail, would you like to speak up now?
Yeah, yeah. I was just making some notes and doing some mental calculations, and I recognized that this cookie crumbling experience. I think the only time my cookie didn't crumble was in my 30s. So this is a process that I'm very familiar with and have actually been in for the last 4 years. And in particular, this year has been, in some ways, um, I see Sherry's comment here, shaking you to awaken you, has probably been an extreme of that. And in other ways, this time around, it really feels like it's helping me really embrace my own power and my own leadership. Now, you asked in your original question, like, how does it feel? What are the senses in your body? And I have to say that I would say the first 6 months of this year in particular, I had to step away from my business,
Mhm.
my kids, and I don't want to get too much into it because they're minors, but my kids I had to be mom. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm always mom, but I really had to step up and support my kids. Um, there are things going on with other family relationships, and it just felt like, one thing would happen, and then another thing would happen, and then another thing would happen, and then one thing would kind of resolve, and then a new thing would come in its place. And I mean, this is still going on for me. This is still going on for me. Every time I think I'm coming out of it and can catch some breath, new thing comes along. Like, nope, you're not done yet. So the difference between this and some pretty hairy, gnarly experiences from my past is really having um, safe spaces and safe people in my life now. Having mentors, coaches, colleagues, friends, and really having a much deeper relationship with Source. I've done a lot of praying this year, a lot of praying. Um, Having my own practices, my morning practices, spiritual practices, whatever you want to call that. But yeah, it's even with all that, even knowing how to be in transformational experiences, how to facilitate transformational experiences. I have many times this year had those moments, curled up in a ball, bawling my eyes out, cursing the heavens,
Mhm.
anger, grief, enraged, all of it. I have felt all of it. And what I really hope that people listening can take away is, it's even when you're on a path like this, that it's not about being perfect and it's not about not feeling. It's about really being present with your feelings and allowing the feelings to move through you, being responsible and accountable for that, but also not suppressing it, not tamping it down. And I think that, through our social conditioning, that's what we're taught to do. We dismiss people of their feelings, we don't normalize, we don't validate. And really, I feel like humanity is collectively at a place where we're being asked to really step up in our own self leadership, to take responsibility for our feelings, to be honest about our feelings, to honor them, and do it in a respectful way as best possible for the people around us. And I think that when the cookie crumbles, it's a signal that something or some things in your life you're either outgrowing, are no longer working for you, or are taking you off your path.
Right, right.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that, Gail. Um, yeah, we've all got some common experiences for sure. Um, in terms of a cookie crumbling, I can remember I must have had a really, really stale and hard cookie because it lasted for about 40 years, the first 40 years of my life. And in that time, um, I think what really happened, I was like Sarah, I was trying to accommodate what I believed everybody else wanted and expected from me. I was trying to show up the way they wanted. I was trying to be the kind of person they wanted me to be. And what I didn't realize is by abiding by that way of thinking, by going along with that narrative, I was hiding myself. And in the process of doing that, I was just getting gradually more and more angry and resentful over the course of that 40-year period. And it wasn't until my mom passed in 1992. So now you can figure out how old I am. Uh, I had a kind of a blow up. So my cookie didn't just crumble; it freaking exploded. All right, and I had an event that happened um, involving myself and my sister. That was my real wake up call, and that led me to understand just how dysfunctional my life had been up to that point. I still wasn't fully able to acknowledge and accept the degree of the inner anger that I had been feeling, and I certainly had no tools for figuring out how to heal that energy. And so it wasn't until actually 2003. I mean, there was some little dabbling in personal growth work and different kinds of workshops and stuff to help me learn a little more about what I had been doing and how I had been showing up. But it wasn't until 2003 when I did my new warrior training adventure with the Mankind Project that everything, I mean, I thought the cookie had exploded before. Wow, you should have seen what happened at that event. It was like a volcano erupted inside me, and all that anger and resentment and hatred and all the ugliness just started pouring out. And I mean, I was beaten on stuff, you know, I was doing everything. My body was just aching to get all this stuff out. And surprisingly, I mean, it seemed like it took a very, very long time. But in reality, in real time, it only took maybe 20, 25 minutes or so. But when I reached the end of that anger and that rage, what happened next was just all kinds of sorrow. I mean, really, really deep, painful uh, sadness that was just coming out of me. And I mean, I never, well, I mean, I was a young man, so I was taught not to cry. Well, let me tell you something. There was nothing going to stop the tears this time. Nothing. They were flowing. The tears were flowing. Snot was flowing. Crap was coming out of my chest and everything. It was just mind-boggling. And once that ended, all of a sudden I felt this incredible peace, incredible opening. And in that moment, I had this experience of warm, delicious, golden blue light kind of coming in to fill up all that space that I had just opened up. And in that moment, I also had the experience of seeing everybody else in the room. And this was all men, by the way, but seeing everybody else in the room, not so much as human beings, but as spiritual beings who were just shining in that room. And we were all connected. It was just an amazing, beautiful, fantastic experience. And from that point forward, I have just been committed to this idea of helping people to find out the truth of who they really are, because that is where the soul resides. What I have learned is that, you know, I have a name, but the name is not who I am. And I have all these roles that I play, but the roles aren't who I am. And I have all this education and job description and this and that and the other thing, but none of those are who I am. In fact, I'm not even the feelings or the thoughts or the experiences that I have. Those are merely expressions of who I am and what I am. Expressions that occur in a particular point in time. And so if I'm none of those things, well, what the hell am I? And that was the the aha really that came to me is that, like everybody else, I am a divine, magnificent, unlimited spiritual being of light and love, and I just happen to be sharing this temporary human experience with all of you. That's what I've learned about myself. So what's really interesting about all of this is that, sure, I still have situations where the cookie crumbles, but I am way more, I won't say relaxed, but I understand that this is just the universe providing me with new opportunities now to express and experience all of who I am. Whereas before, I thought that the whole universe was out to get me. So there's a huge awakening that happens if we are willing to allow that cookie to do its work and then to just honestly and openly express the truth of who we are. And that's what we're doing here today. I think this we've been doing this show together as a group for, I don't know, about 7 or 8 months now, I think. And I think this is the deepest we have gone individually as a group. And I love that we are now willing to be this vulnerable, because I believe that through our vulnerability, we can help other people connect to their vulnerability and begin their process of growth and development and healing. So I'm sorry, I took a little longer than I wanted to take on that, but that was just what was true for me in the moment. So I just wanted to share that.
Beautifully said. You
This
triggered something. You triggered something. I'm sorry. Am I stepping over you, Sarah?
and I carry on.
David, you triggered something in me that really, in that moment of your kind of seeing the blue light and being able to discharge all of that. And it's just, you said you allowed it. I was taught, much like yourself, that you had a role to play. You had things that you had to do. You had roles to fulfill. You had commitments you had to honor, and that was where your life was. And I didn't allow for all those feelings. I was a very good stuffer, by the way. I don't know, the old trash compactor. Any feeling that came up, nope, 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 nope. Until at one point, the lid blew off, and all of these emotions were coming out. And I mean, they were huge, horrible emotions. They could fill a room. And I was never taught how to deal with emotions. I was always taught, nope, don't deal with it, don't deal with it, don't deal with it. So once I allowed that I could have these emotions, being a guy, I could have these emotions, I could use these emotions, and then I made friends with them. That was the biggest part of it. It wasn't the dark side of me. It wasn't the dark side, that you hear about shadow work and all of that. It wasn't the dark side of me. This was me. These were parts of me. These were times in my life. These were traumas. These were things that I never really dealt with because I didn't quite know how to deal with them. So I just stuffed them. And so I allowed them out and I made friends with them. And I always talk about the night you wake up at 3 o'clock and the monsters come out of the closet and they fill the room, right? You're kind of looking over the covers and you're looking at the monsters that come out of, and they're filling the room. And I always say, you look them in the eye and they get smaller. You make friends with them, they get smaller. All of a sudden, instead of filling the room, they fit in the palm of your hand. Now it's the same feeling, it just doesn't overwhelm you. And for me, that's how I was able to understand my feelings, but also be present. Instead of those emotions coming up and just overwhelming me, whether they're sorrow, anger, grief, I could stay present. They would come up, I'd say, thank you very much for coming up. I got this. And staying present in the conversation, in the relationship, and then gratitude followed that. And Sarah, you talked about, Gail, you talked about your rituals in the morning, and gratitude was the thing that brought me out of all of it. Being grateful. I went to an Al-Anon meeting back in my 30s, and the course said, what are you grateful for? 3 things. And at that point in my life, I could not list anything. I wasn't grateful for anything. And now if somebody asks me that, I can go on for 2 days about what I am grateful for in this life. And
Right.
that brings us to happiness, that happiness that you feel. And I find happiness is kind of occasional, but brings you to bliss. And bliss and joy are constant. And
Right.
that's where when your life crumbles, sometimes it's just perspective of how you view an event. And when you have that proper perspective in your life, the cookie crumbling is, okay, that's what should happen. I didn't see that coming, but okay. I know I'm going to get through this. I've been through worse. I've certainly been through worse. I'll get through this again. And so it's a matter of perspective, a matter of how to build that. And I love, you're right about that vulnerability that we all share, but I think it gets deeper and deeper each and every time that we do these programs. And I love the fact that people can see and maybe hear parts of their own story in these tales that we tell about us. And that no
Right.
matter where you are in this journey, how elevated, quote unquote, elevated you are, that these things, because we live a human life.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Sarah, you were going to say something.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, sort of while listening to all of that, that's actually almost expanded. Sorry. So thinking about what happened to me at the time that I actually found my life. I found me, I got myself back. But going right back to where my life really crumbled. But I was less than a year old. So I have absolutely no actual memories. But there are cellular memories, which is why I now do what I do. And at that time, because I was hospitalized, because my parents couldn't come in and see me for anything more than an hour once a week, and the rules of the hospital were every other day, but the reality was for an hour once a week. And I spent my first birthday in hospital. I spent 3 months in hospital. And so I didn't feel heard. It didn't matter how much I'd cried. My parents were not there for me, not their fault. I am not putting any blame here on anything other than the system and circumstances. And I think that's where obviously understanding as an adult has to come in, but that doesn't help the child. But when I had the broken jaw, it was only a couple of years ago, sort of when we were doing started the Today's Conversation programs, we were doing a topic and I was out for a walk and it suddenly absolutely dawned on me that at the time of the broken jaw, and especially after I'd got home after the tooth had been extracted and once the injections all wore off and the pain in my face, and I literally sat with my face against a hot radiator. And my now ex-husband, he got me a bowl of soup for my tea, which was probably something I'd made anyway. And the following morning, oh, you're all right now, you can get on with life, you can prepare my tea. It dawned on me, again, I wasn't being listened to, I wasn't being heard. And that is a huge thing for anybody in life. Doesn't matter what age you are. And I think that's what's so lovely about doing these conversations, is because we are listening to each other. We are opening up and we are feeling heard. And for those of you that watch this, it is so important that you find those people that will listen and will hear. But may I make a suggestion to each and every one of you? Listen to yourself and hear yourself. It was the understanding of that, suddenly that awareness, that light bulb moment of what that situation of sitting against that radiator and not, it was going back. It was taking me back to not being heard as a child. So sometimes our cookie crumbling is about helping us to see things that have potentially happened in our past that we haven't dealt with. It's a way, it is a wake-up call, but maybe in a different way to some people think about it. We've got to get out of the rut we're in. But was it more to the point of, actually, is it about healing something else? Something much earlier in our lives? And it's really important then that the cookie crumbles, because that's the only way, as a gift to ourselves, the universe knows, to get our attention sufficiently so that we actually start to listen.
Right. Yeah, beautiful. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking of, and I think I was partly triggered to this by Scott's statement as well. The idea of the cookie crumbling has just shifted completely in my mind now. I don't think of life that way anymore. Whenever I have this sense that the cookie is crumbling, in reality, what I believe I'm experiencing is the illusions in front of me are slowly dissolving, and I am piercing through that veil toward the truth. That is kind of how it feels to me now. I know that sounds kind of woo woo, but that really kind of describes what I see as the transformation, and it's available for all of us, by the way. The more we can bring our attention away from our ego mind and down into our soul, the more we can dissolve the illusions of that are surrounding us and get back to the truth. And that's really what I think this is all about. And Sarah, you also mentioned about, being stuck in a rut. Well, let's just face it. Everybody knows what it's like to drive well, maybe not everybody, but most people know what it's like to drive a car on a dirt road or a muddy road and get stuck in a rut. And trying to make a right turn off that road or a left turn off that road is really, really hard. Getting out of the rut is hard. It takes focus, it takes attention, it takes intention. And that's kind of what it's like. But the other thing to understand is your brain operates on certain kinds of thought processes, the firing of certain synapses that create these neural pathways in your mind. The more you use them, the more they become like ruts in your head. So if you are stuck in a certain way of thinking, guess what? You may just be in some kind of a mental rut. And so what do you have to do? You have to become aware. You have to understand, okay, I am thinking this thing and I know it's not really true, but I can't stop thinking it. Well, what do you do about that? You have to find a way to dissolve that belief and begin creating a new belief, which is like veering off the road and finding a new way of thinking. And it's going to take effort because that road's going to keep wanting to pull you back. So I think our what we're really talking about here is allowing ourselves to recognize what's really going on, to open ourselves to it, to allow whatever is happening to happen and just accept it, and then see what gifts the universe is actually bringing to us. That is probably the healthiest way you can approach things. Now, are you going to be there in the moment that it's happening? Well, maybe not. Maybe you still have some ego mind attachments to the way the world works. And maybe you still want things to happen the way you want them to happen right now and so on. But you can get yourself out of that way of thinking and out of that way of being with practice. Just simply observe and say, oh, I see what I'm doing. I've tried this before and it didn't work so well. Maybe I can try a different thing and see what happens. So that's kind of what I wanted to say there. Gail, sorry, I wanted to give you a chance to speak again.
Yeah. Oh, I have, you saw me scribbling because I have lots of, lots of responses. And I think I'm going to start with Sarah, because Sarah and I are kindred spirits on, being heard and being seen. And my work is about that from a business perspective, but really it all ties back to the personal and childhood, and being that invisible child, or the wounded inner child that we all have been in our lifetimes. And it really often does tie back to this piece of, they didn't hear me, they didn't see me. And there may be other things that it ties back to. Um, and what I want to say about that is, when this cookie crumbles for you, right? One of the most powerful things is to hear the feelings, your own feelings first, and to really be just so vulnerable and honest with yourself first, without judging, without dismissing yourself. And so I just wanted to expand on what Sarah said about all of that. That has been one of the most powerful, pretty straightforward, but one of the most powerful and potent methods of healing for me is allowing myself, allowing my ego. My ego and I are always dancing with each other. I can really get pretty righteous about things. And I have learned how to work with that in a way of like, okay, you're letting me know something is off here. Let's sit, it's almost like personifying it, sitting down. Let's chat. Let's have a chat. What's really going on here for
Exactly.
you?
I do that all the time.
Right. Instead of projecting it out, which is, trust me, I've been there too. But we tend to project it out because we've not learned other ways. We've not learned to voice and honor where we're at. And so this piece about so desperately wanting to be seen and heard, I get that. And it really starts with seeing and hearing yourself first. And when you're able to do that, you can then go back into those situations where you really, really felt that you weren't seen, you weren't heard, you weren't valued, you weren't honored. And you can do it in a healthy way, with really healthy boundaries and really clear, and still being grounded, open, and vulnerable. And you'll start to see, like, who are the people who can meet you in that place. And you'll see who the people can't meet you in that place. So being able to connect with yourself, being able also to connect with that inner child that just so desperately wants to be loved and heard and cared for and nurtured, such an important piece in all of this. And David, I wanted to expand on what you said about, piercing the veil, and that whole like looking at that whole process of like, oh, this is just another layer of the illusion coming down. Like I definitely resonate with that. One of the things that I've done pretty consistently over the last few years in my practices is to say, show me the truth in all things, and bring me the people who are meant for me. And you know what? That happens, and it doesn't always happen in the way that I want it to.
Right.
It often doesn't happen in the way that I want it to.
Yeah, and some of the people and the circumstances you meet, you say, geez, this is not what I had in mind.
Right. And again, it's kind of like, it's not always, but it's starting to get to the point where it's like, okay, you start to reach a point where you can even have humor in those situations, and really come out of any sort of grief or sorrow or hurt relatively quickly, and get yourself back to center and say, all right, well, what is this reflecting back to me? Like, this is actually a really ridiculous situation. I'm really curious why this is showing up for me now. Like, what is this reflecting back to me? Because I
Well,
personally believe
another question you
everything is
could ask
happening
is,
for you.
another question you could ask is, how did I invite this into my life? Or what purpose does this serve? Because obviously somehow I drew it in. And that's really important. And most people aren't willing to take responsibility for that. They think that, oh, life just happens to them. Well, on some level, that might be true because there are other people in the world who are also creating this life together. But very often, if I can just take a moment and ask, okay, why am I inviting this in? What is the purpose of this in my life right now? How does this serve me? And if you can just ask that question, often you can just completely switch your perspective on how you're seeing the event.
Can I just add on that real quick?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's why we're
and
here.
yes, and because I have been playing with this and have been challenged with this concept. Not at first, but as I do deeper work in these realms, um, and as I feel like I'm sort of closing out certain patterns and cycles, and I know that there are deeper layers. I do sometimes personally feel like, okay, like I don't want, and I want to speak to this for people who are listening and who are having sort of this mind this dialogue in their own mind of course not, of course I wouldn't draw this in. And what I want to say about that is, if you can just hold that and really feel into, even if you're doing inner work, even if you're like, yeah, I've been working on this pattern. I had a situation this year where I was working, I know I mentioned it in another episode. I was doing some exercises from the book Existential Kink, and really looking at, like, why do I have so many painful relationships within my family and within the family that I've chosen? And if you are open enough and brave enough to really say, okay, I don't see how I'm still I don't see, I've done so much work around this. I don't see how I'm attracting this. I don't see what I'm getting out of this. And you're willing to sort of be in that and then also say, it's still here. So what is this about? It will bring you to a new place. And I was shocked because I went into the exercise with all of the resistance and all of the, I've been doing this, I don't want this anymore. Why is this still showing up? And I got the very clear answer of, you know what? I get off on getting angry. It makes me feel powerful. And I'm somebody who came from a background where I didn't have any power. And so seeing that really helped me recognize, all right, this is why, yes, this is actually helping me to step in my power in a responsible way and in a healthy way. And I don't need I don't need to access that anymore in this way. So it's not about like, oh, what am I doing wrong to attract this in? No, it's like really digging and being curious about, why
Right.
is this still here?
Yeah. Well, I really like what you said about, uh, okay, I don't like this, I don't want it, but it's still here. So what's going on? That is a great opening, a great invitation. And the thing that I want people to understand is, very often what we're attracting into our lives, we are attracting unconsciously. We're not consciously saying, oh, I want this negativity and pain in our life. No, we're not, most people are not doing that. You may be saying in your conscious mind, man, I really want to have a beautiful, loving relationship with, a man or a woman or whatever. And I want these sorts of things to happen. I want to try and manifest that in my life. But there's a part of you deep down inside that says, I am not worthy of that kind of relationship. There's a part of you that still has that story that says, the kind of relationship I'm really worthy of is one where someone beats the crap out of me all the time. Now, you're not saying that consciously, but there's a part of you deep down inside that is wounded and hasn't yet been healed. And it may be the energy that is stronger than your conscious desire for whatever else. It's these unconscious beliefs that we have to raise awareness about, right? And that's why I ask the question, how am I inviting this in? How am I doing this? And that helps me to recognize, okay, there's a part of me, like you said, there's a part of me that really enjoys anger or whatever the case may be. Or there's a part of me that doesn't believe that I deserve such and such. Now, once I become aware of that, then my next step really is to start bringing some love and healing to that part of myself. Maybe if I can even somehow coax that part of me out of the darkness and into the light and just have a conversation, like Gail mentioned a moment ago, just ask. So where did this belief come from? Where did you first come up with this belief? How does it serve you to keep holding on to it? What do you really want? What are you trying to get out of life? Ask that part as if it's a real being. You'd be amazed at how much wisdom you can get. And furthermore, here's something that I also have personally experienced. When I get in touch with those parts of myself and I have interviews like this and I ask questions and I learn, I discover almost invariably this dark part of myself that is acting out in some weird way is actually seeking love, connection, oneness, beingness. It's looking for one of those things. So it's really trying to get that. It just doesn't know how. And that's where the healing comes in, because if you can say, I really want that too, so let's figure out how we can do it together. Now you have a partner who's willing to work with you. And not only that, this part of yourself, part of the reason that part feels the way it does is that it was not heard or seen. It was cast away early on, and it didn't like that. Well, you know how that feels because you already lived through it. So you can therefore be fully empathetic and compassionate towards this part of yourself, and you can heal it. You can bring love and just amazing growth out of that. This is powerful stuff that we're talking about here.
Can I, before I have to go, and I know we've got a few minutes yet, I remember I mentioned name and the importance of name. And I was called Jane as a baby. I was christened Sarah Jane, no hyphen and no H. But I was christened Sarah Jane, but I was always Jane. The family called me Jane. And when I changed from my first school to my second, we'd moved town, so nobody knew me. And I went to my new school and I told them I was called Sarah, which confused the living daylights out of the family because I'd always been Jane. And I was out for a walk on local heathland in my little house that I bought here in Bournemouth, not this one, the one before. And I was talking to my little one, Jane. So I was having that sort of conversation. I love being out in nature to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another light bulb moment. The only person who had ever rejected me was me when I changed my name from Jane to Sarah.
Mm.
And that is why the understanding of the importance of name when you're working with the inner child, when you're working with healing. I hear what you're saying about name isn't who you are, but it really is important. And when I work with my own name, and I do on a daily basis, I really do, I've already done it for today. I do tone my name on a daily basis. And I do a mix of Sarah Jane and Jane Sarah. So I don't mind whether you call me Sarah, Sarah Jane, or Jane. As far as I'm concerned now, with all the work I've done, whatever you call me, that is honoring the whole of me. That is speaking to the whole of me. I listened to my younger self. I asked her, and she helped me to understand. So connecting with our younger self, it was like that moment of, oh wow, this is how I was feeling after the broken jaw, because it took me all the way back to that hospital stay.
Yeah, beautiful.
The
Thank you for
answers
sharing that, Sarah.
and the answers are all in our story. That's, I think, it's helping us to go back and connect with younger self. The answers are all there when we are open to listening to ourselves.
Yeah, right. And beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's one aspect of your story that I don't think you've ever shared with me before. So I really appreciate that. You know, I wanted to just say that some of us, our story doesn't begin the day we were born here. For some of us, we may have history that predates our arrival on this planet in this lifetime. So I think it's important to honor that as well. I personally haven't had that experience, but I hear that other people have had that experience. And so whatever might be true for you, whatever might be true for you in terms of your story, honor all of it, no matter how far back in time it might go, because all of it has helped to contribute to where you are today, right? And even though, as I say, you have a story, but the story is not who you are. The story simply is a reflection of all the things that you have done to express who you are up till now. And the story could change dramatically tomorrow. So don't get stuck in it. Because then that's just another rut. And that's where we talk about, being stuck in that comfort zone. It's easier to stay in the what's the word I'm looking for? In what we know, the familiar, the known and the familiar. It's easier to stay in that than it is to step out into something that we don't know, because we just don't know what's going to happen. And so we have some fear about what might happen. And that fear is what keeps us trapped in that so-called comfort zone. Scott, I wanted to give you another chance to say something. I know you've been waiting patiently there, so I wanted to give you a chance to speak.
I am part of the audience. I am enjoying this thoroughly. Absolutely.
Okay.
I find the three of you fascinating. What I love about doing this the most is be able to spend time with you, to be able to share these things. Everybody had the points, but the work that I've done on myself, within myself, is that 3-year-old self, that 8-year-old self, that 12-year-old self, that 17-year-old self, and all those semi-traumas, or large and small, that we go through in life. And those are the parts of me that came up and I was speaking through. That was the problem. I was a 35-year-old guy and I was speaking through my 8-year-old self. Didn't come out really well. It really wasn't all that polished. And people would go, "Oh my goodness, who is this?" So,
Yeah.
and we talk about our inner children and healing our inner children, but it's just acknowledging them, hearing them, giving them what they need. If my 8-year-old self wanted to ride his bike to the store and mom wouldn't let me, I felt less than. Well, you know what? I let my 8-year-old self, my inner child, ride all over the place. He has a bike. He has a, he just goes all over the place, and it allows him to do that. And the funny thing is, it manifests itself in me, where I now travel everywhere. I love to travel, and I go everywhere. But it was my allowing that younger self to be able to do that. And part of the cookie crumbling is, I think, getting down, as Gail had said, into that inner, those different layers, and being able to take away all the debris and dig through all the crumbs to who you are, truly are. And
Right.
what is in a name? Well, but when you name it, it makes it real. When it's real and it has form, then you can deal with it much easier. I love this. I love this. We could talk for hours on this.
Right. I noticed Sherry just said, my 50-year-old self is still trying to convince my 12-year-old self that she fits in, with a little bit of exasperation expressed at the end there. Yeah, I'm sure that we all have gone through that challenge. I I could speak for myself. I know that I don't worry so much about whether I fit in anymore. You know, if I want to participate in something, I'll just invite myself in. You know, I'll see some people talking and I'll say, "Hey, you mind if I join you?" 99% of the time they'll say, "Sure, come on in. We're having fun here." You know, occasionally someone will say, "Well, we're having a private conversation. Can we connect with you later?" Great. What I have learned is that I can fit in anywhere when I give myself permission to do that. But I understand what Sherry is saying about convincing the 12-year-old, the inner 12-year-old, because I still have to deal with my young child, my internal child, and remind him that even though he didn't feel like he fit in, he really was loved. And I show him examples of where he was loved. And even though it came from a dysfunctional place, even though mommy wasn't necessarily always totally present, even though mommy's way of acknowledging him was to say, "Well, where did you get such stupid ideas?" At least she was listening to the ideas in the first place. So, you know, and she wasn't really as nasty as all of that. But you know how it is when we look at our lives and we see how we lived and the things that we had to deal with. If we can do nothing more than just to have compassion for ourselves, for the journey that we've traveled through in order to get where we are today, and maybe to give ourselves a big hug and a hearty congratulations because we made it here, which means we broke through, we overcame, we went around, we found all those obstacles, and somehow we got around them, and here we are. So maybe when the cookie crumbles, it's an opportunity to have a different kind of, maybe you can have some ice cream with cookie crumbles on them. I don't know. What do you think, Gail?
Yeah, I want to speak to Sherry in particular, and first just say that the need to belong is a basic human need, and I've been doing a lot of inner teen, a lot of inner teen work because it's different than younger or older, and I'm actually seeing this theme with in particular with women, um, that those ages between 12 and 15, 16 is really coming up. I think collectively it's coming up. I'm not sure, I can't speak so much for men because I don't have as many men clients. But there's something collectively happening where the inner teen is speaking loudly to us. And so what I would invite you to do, Sherry, if you feel so called, is to, yeah, yeah, it is rough for you're right. It's Sherry and our Gen X. So I'm sure it's rough for every generation, but yeah, that's a whole other episode. I would invite you to maybe, really spend some time normalizing normalizing with your inner teen those experiences where she felt like she didn't fit in and had to fit in and maybe had to force things in order to fit in, and to just ask, like, how does she want to fit in with you now, and just see where that goes.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, Gail. Scott, final words before we close out.
Anybody listening to this live or otherwise, come join us each and every week, every month rather, and watch and listen, learn, take it in. You will find aspects of yourself in all of these stories, and these are wonderful people to hear them from.
Right. Well,
Thank
thank you for that, Scott. Yeah. And thank you all for being here and for watching the recording or however you're seeing this. Remember, we do this show once a month, the second Wednesday of the month at 1 p.m. And that's every month, unless our cookie crumbles. but in which case, who knows what's going to happen. But so I invite you to come back and join us. And if you want to watch recordings, you can catch them on my website at yourlifemasterycoach.com. So just wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. And I guess we'll see you next time on Soul Empowerment. Bye-bye, everybody.